settle into my favorite armchair, the one with the faded burgundy fabric that's witnessed countless conversations over the years. The afternoon sun filters through my kitchen window, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. I've been thinking about Charlotte's story all morning, the Jerry Chronicles, a Texas survival story, and how it stirred up memories I'd tried to bury for the past 11 years. You know, I say to my reflection in the coffee mug, Charlotte wasn't the only one who survived Jerry's reign of terror. The memory comes flooding back like a dam bursting. It was 2020, the height of the pandemic, and I was working as an administrative coordinator at Lone Star Regulatory Services. I watched from the sidelines as Jerry Morrison, our so-called manager, terrorized employee after employee. Charlotte had been one of the lucky ones who'd managed to escape relatively unscathed, but I witnessed the carnage he left in his wake. Jerry Morrison. Even now, 11 years later, the name makes my stomach turn. I can still picture him. Average height, slightly overweight, with that ridiculous neck tattoo that read, "Born Alone, Die Alone" in Gothic script. The first time I saw it, I nearly burst out laughing. Here was this middle-aged man, desperate to appear edgy and intimidating, managing a small regulatory office in Austin like he was running some kind of criminal enterprise. But the laughter died quickly. Jerry wasn't just eccentric, he was dangerous. A narcissistic manipulator who used his position to torment anyone unlucky enough to fall under his supervision. The first victim I remember clearly was Mia Chin, a bright-eyed intern who'd started just 2 months before the pandemic hit. Mia was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in public administration and dreams of making a difference in government service. She was the kind of person who stayed late without being asked, who brought homemade cookies to share with the office, who genuinely believed that hard work and dedication would be rewarded. Jerry saw her enthusiasm as weakness, something to be exploited. I remember the day Mia called in sick. It was March 2020 and COVID-19 was spreading like wildfire through Texas. Mia had been feeling unwell for days, fever, body aches, the telltale dry cough that had everyone on edge. She'd gotten tested and was waiting for results, but her symptoms were getting worse by the hour. "I can barely get out of bed," Mia whispered into the phone, her voice hoarse and exhausted. "The doctor said I should quarantine until I get my test results back." Jerry's response was immediate and brutal. "I don't care if you're dying, Chin. We have deadlines to meet. You can work from home. I expect those compliance reports on my desk by end of business today." I was in the next cubicle, pretending to work while listening to the conversation. I watched Jerry pace back and forth, his face red with anger, as if Mia's illness was a personal affront to his authority. "But Jerry," Mia protested weakly, "I can't even sit up for more than 10 minutes without getting dizzy." "Then work lying down." Jerry shouted into the phone. "I don't want to hear excuses. You're the intern, which means you do what I tell you to do, when I tell you to do it. If you can't handle the pressure, maybe you're not cut out for this job." I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to intervene, to tell Jerry he was being unreasonable, but I'd seen what happened to employees who crossed him. The extra assignments, the nitpicking, the constant criticism, it wasn't worth it. For the next 3 days, while Mia's COVID test came back positive and her symptoms worsened, Jerry continued to pile work on her. He'd call her at all hours, demanding updates on projects, assigning new tasks, treating her like she was malingering instead of fighting for her life. "She's probably just faking it," I overheard him telling another supervisor. "These young people think they can get out of work by claiming they're sick. Well, not on my watch." The irony was devastating. 3 weeks later, Jerry himself came down with COVID-19. But unlike Mia, who tried to work through her illness, Jerry disappeared completely. One day he was there, bullying and berating everyone in sight, and the next day he was gone. At first, we thought he'd just taken a few sick days. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into over a month. I later learned that Jerry's case had been severe. He'd been hospitalized and spent time in the ICU, fighting for his life just as he'd forced Mia to fight for hers while still working. But here's where Jerry's true character showed. While he was gone, he left all of his responsibilities to Mia and her boyfriend, Marcus, who also worked at the office. These two young people, barely out of college, were expected to manage the workload of an entire department while their supervisor was incapacitated. I watched in amazement as Mia and Marcus rose to the challenge. They worked 16-hour days, coordinated with other departments, managed client relationships, and somehow kept the office running. They did this without complaint, without additional compensation, and without any acknowledgement from upper management. When Jerry finally returned after 6 weeks, he acted as if nothing had happened. He never thanked Mia and Marcus for their efforts. He never apologized for his behavior during Mia's illness. He just waltzed back into the office, neck tattoo and all, and resumed his reign of terror as if he'd never left. That's when I knew I was dealing with someone truly dangerous. The second major incident I remember involved Amelia Rodriguez, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her early 30s who'd been hired to cover the HR/finance position. Amelia had come from a larger company where she'd been respected for her expertise and professionalism. She was used to working in environments where competence was valued and where managers actually managed instead of just bullying their subordinates. Her first meeting with Jerry was legendary in our office. I was nearby when Amelia walked into Jerry's office for their initial one-on-one meeting. Through the glass walls, I could see Amelia's face change as she took in Jerry's appearance. The wrinkled shirt, the unkempt hair, and especially that ridiculous neck tattoo. Later, Amelia confided in me about that meeting. "I couldn't believe he was the manager," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I mean, I've worked with difficult people before, but this guy, he looked like he'd gotten lost on his way to a motorcycle rally and accidentally ended up in charge of a government office." But appearances were just the beginning. Jerry's management style was what really set him apart. He had perfected what I came to think of as favor manipulation, a twisted system where he would perform basic job duties and then present them as personal favors that required reciprocation. I remember one particular incident clearly. There had been a scheduling conflict with a client meeting, and Jerry had resolved it by making a few phone calls, literally part of his job description as manager. But the next day, he approached Amelia with his typical smug expression. "Hey, Amelia," he said, leaning against her desk with false casualness. "I just did you a huge favor yesterday by fixing that scheduling mess. Now I need you to do me a favor and stay back late tonight to sort through the Henderson contract files. They're a complete disaster, and I need them organized by morning." Amelia looked at him with barely concealed disgust. "Jerry, resolving scheduling conflicts is part of your job. That's not a favor. That's what you're paid to do." Jerry's face darkened immediately. "Are you questioning my authority, Rodriguez?" "I'm questioning your logic," Amelia replied coolly. "You can't present doing your job as a favor and then expect people to owe you something in return." That was Amelia's first mistake, disagreeing with Jerry. I tried to warn her, but Amelia was too principled to back down. She believed in fairness, in treating people with respect, in the basic dignity of work. These concepts were foreign to Jerry Morrison. The retaliation was swift and petty. Over the next few weeks, Jerry buried Amelia in unnecessary work. He'd assign her tasks that were clearly outside her job description, demand reports that served no purpose, and create artificial deadlines that forced her to work late every night. "I've been doing HR for 8 years, Amelia told me during one of our coffee breaks. "I've never seen anything like this. He's like a child throwing a tantrum because someone told him no." But the sandwich incident was what finally broke Amelia's patience, and what led to one of the most satisfying moments of my career. It was a Tuesday in late fall when the NSA held a conference at our building. I remember the day clearly because it was one of those rare occasions when Jerry actually had to act professional in front of important government officials. He'd spent the morning shouting at everyone to make sure everything was perfect, as if the success of the event would somehow reflect his own competence. The conference went well, thanks entirely to the efforts of the staff Jerry had been terrorizing for months. But as always happened with catered events, there was food left over, specifically a large selection of sandwiches that had been ordered for the attendees. Standard procedure was to throw leftover food away, but these sandwiches were still fresh, still perfectly good. I watched as Amelia, always thinking of others, packed up several sandwiches to take home. "I'll either eat them later or give them to homeless people I see on the way home," Amelia explained to me. "It seems like such a waste to throw away perfectly good food." It was a kind gesture, the sort of thing that showed Amelia's character. She wasn't taking the sandwiches for personal gain. She was trying to prevent waste and maybe help someone in need. But Jerry had eyes everywhere. Somehow, he'd found out about the sandwiches, and he'd seen an opportunity to assert his dominance once again. The next day, Amelia was called into Jerry's office. I watched through the glass walls as Jerry gestured dramatically, pointing at documents and clearly working himself into a self-righteous fury. When Amelia emerged from the meeting, she was pale with anger. "He's charging me for the sandwiches," she told me in disbelief. "He actually petitioned HR to dock my pay for sandwiches that were going in the garbage." I felt my own anger rising. "He can't be serious." "Oh, he's dead serious," Amelia replied. "He made sure the accounts team took money out of my paycheck. $12.50 for sandwiches that were literally being thrown away." It wasn't about the money, of course. $12.50 was nothing to someone like Amelia, who had a good salary and solid financial foundation. It was about the principle, about the pettiness, about the way Jerry used his position to humiliate and control people. But Jerry had finally pushed the wrong person too far. I smile even now, remembering what happened next. It was beautiful in its simplicity, elegant in its execution, and perfectly timed for maximum impact. A few weeks after the sandwich incident, our office was hit with a wave of illnesses. It was winter, flu season was in full swing, and several key employees had called in sick on the same day. Jerry was in a panic, running around the office like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to figure out how to handle the workload with a skeleton crew. That's when he called Amelia. I was at my desk when I heard Jerry's side of the phone conversation. His voice was different than usual, not the usual arrogant bark, but something closer to pleading. "Amelia, I really need you to come in today," he said. "I know it's your day off, but we're short-staffed and I've got government inspectors coming in this afternoon. I can't handle this by myself." There was a pause as Amelia responded on the other end. I know, Jerry continued. "But I'm asking you as a personal favor. I'll make it up to you, I promise. I really need you here." Another pause. "Great, thank you so much. I'll see you in an hour." Jerry hung up the phone with visible relief. He actually smiled, a rare occurrence that made my skin crawl. But an hour passed and Amelia didn't show up. Then another hour. Jerry started pacing, checking his watch, looking out the window like a worried parent waiting for a teenager to come home. He called Amelia again around noon. "Where are you?" I heard him say, "You said you'd be here an hour ago." There was a longer pause this time. "What do you mean you quit?" Jerry's voice rose to a shout. "You can't quit. I need you here." But apparently Amelia had indeed quit. Right there, over the phone, on the day Jerry needed her most. I watched with fascination as Jerry's face went through several different colors. Red, purple, then a sort of grayish-green that suggested he might actually be having a stroke. The government inspectors arrived right on schedule at 2 p.m. Jerry was forced to handle the inspection by himself, running around like a madman, trying to locate files he'd never bothered to organize, attempting to explain procedures he'd never bothered to learn. I'd never seen anything like it. Jerry, who had spent months terrorizing his employees, was now completely exposed. Without competent people to cover for his incompetence, he was revealed for what he really was, a bully who had no actual management skills whatsoever. The inspectors were professional, but clearly unimpressed. They spent 3 hours going through files, asking pointed questions and documenting deficiencies. Jerry grew increasingly frantic as the afternoon wore on, sweating through his shirt, snapping at everyone within earshot. The final straw came when one of the inspectors asked for a specific compliance report that should have been readily available. Jerry tore through file cabinets, searched through computer directories, and finally had to admit that he couldn't find it. "This is unacceptable," the lead inspector said coldly. "We'll be noting this deficiency in our report." Jerry completely lost it. I watched in amazement as he threw what could only be described as a temper tantrum, right there in front of the government officials. He slammed filing cabinets, kicked a trash can, and launched into a profanity-laced tirade about unreliable employees and impossible expectations. The inspectors exchanged glances, made notes, and quickly wrapped up their visit. I was certain they'd never seen anything like it in their careers. The fallout from that day was swift and merciless. The inspection report was scathing, documenting not just the missing compliance documents, but also Jerry's unprofessional behavior during the inspection itself. Upper management was forced to take action. Jerry was reassigned within a week, corporate speak for demoted, and shuffled off to a position where he couldn't do any more damage. He was moved to a tiny office in the basement, given a meaningless title, and essentially forgotten about. I heard through the grapevine that he spent his final months with the company filing paperwork and making copies, the kind of work usually reserved for entry-level employees. His salary was cut, his benefits reduced, and his authority stripped away completely. Eventually, he was quietly pushed out during a restructuring initiative. No farewell party, no thank you speech, no gold watch. He was simply there one day and gone the next, leaving behind only memories of his cruelty and incompetence. But the real victory was watching our office transform after his departure. Mia was promoted to a full-time position and thrived under competent leadership. Marcus was recognized for his efforts during Jerry's absence and was fast-tracked for advancement. Other employees who had been cowering under Jerry's reign blossomed, contributing ideas and energy that had been suppressed for years. The new manager was everything Jerry wasn't: professional, competent, respectful. She implemented actual management practices, recognized good work, and treated employees like human beings rather than expendable resources. I finished my coffee and set the mug down on the kitchen table. Outside, the afternoon is fading into evening, and I can hear the sounds of my neighborhood coming alive. Kids playing in yards, dogs barking, the distant hum of traffic. I think about Charlotte's story, about how she survived her own encounters with Jerry Morrison. It's comforting to know that I'm not alone in my memories, that other people witnessed and survived Jerry's particular brand of workplace terrorism. But more than that, I think about the lessons I learned from watching Jerry's rise and fall. There was something almost inevitable about his downfall, like watching a Greek tragedy unfold in real time. His arrogance, his cruelty, his fundamental inability to understand that leadership is about serving others rather than dominating them. It all led to his eventual destruction. The sandwich incident was the perfect metaphor for everything wrong with Jerry's management style. He was so focused on asserting his authority, so determined to punish someone for a minor transgression, that he failed to see the bigger picture. He turned a dedicated employee into an enemy, all for the sake of $12.50. And Amelia's revenge was perfect precisely because it used Jerry's own tactics against him. He'd spent months manipulating people, presenting his basic job duties as favors that required reciprocation. When Amelia said she'd come in to help him, she was giving him exactly what he'd been giving everyone else, a promise that meant nothing when it came time to deliver. I realized that the real lesson isn't about Jerry at all. It's about the power of dignity, the importance of treating people with respect, and the inevitable consequences of bullying and manipulation. Jerry thought he was invincible, protected by his position and his ability to intimidate others. But in the end, his own actions created the circumstances of his downfall. As I prepare dinner, I find myself thinking about all the other Jerry Morrisons out there, the petty tyrants who use their small amounts of power to make other people's lives miserable. I think about the employees who are probably suffering under similar managers right now, wondering if they'll ever find a way out. But I also think about the Amelias and the MIAs of the world, the people who refuse to be broken by bullies, who find ways to fight back, who ultimately prove that dignity and competence will always triumph over cruelty and incompetence. The story of Jerry Morrison isn't unique. I know there are countless similar stories playing out in offices and workplaces across the country. But each one matters. Each one is someone's life, someone's career, someone's dreams being crushed by a person who should have been helping them succeed. I think about my own role in the story. I was a witness, mostly watching from the sidelines as Jerry terrorized my colleagues. I offered support when I could, provided a friendly ear when people needed to vent, but I never directly confronted him. Part of me feels guilty about that. Maybe if I'd spoken up sooner, if I'd been more assertive, things wouldn't have gotten as bad as they did. But I also know that Jerry's victims needed to find their own ways to fight back, to reclaim their power and their dignity. And they did. Mia showed incredible resilience, working through her illness and then stepping up to handle Jerry's responsibilities when he was gone. Marcus proved himself capable of far more than anyone had realized. Amelia delivered the perfect comeuppance, using Jerry's own tactics against him with surgical precision. I sit down to dinner, but my mind is still on the past. I wonder what happened to Jerry after he left the company. Did he learn anything from his experiences? Did he develop any self-awareness about his behavior and its consequences? Probably not, I think. People like Jerry rarely change. They move from job to job, leaving trails of damaged relationships and broken trust behind them. They blame their failures on others, never taking responsibility for their own actions. But the people who survived Jerry's reign of terror, they learned and grew. They developed resilience, learned to recognize the signs of toxic leadership, and gained the confidence to stand up for themselves and others. I've kept in touch with some of my former colleagues over the years. Mia went on to have a successful career in public service, eventually becoming a department head at a major city government. Marcus moved to the private sector and is now a senior consultant for a major firm. Both of them became the kind of leaders they'd wished they'd had during their time with Jerry, supportive, competent, and genuinely concerned about their employees' well-being. As for Amelia, I heard she started her own consulting firm, specializing in organizational development and workplace culture. She built a reputation for helping companies identify and eliminate toxic management practices. It's poetic justice. She turned her experience with Jerry into a career, helping others avoid similar situations. I finish my dinner and settle back into my armchair. The house is quiet now, filled with the comfortable sounds of evening, the tick of the old clock in the hallway, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of television from a neighbor's house. I think about Charlotte's decision to write down her experiences to create the Jerry Chronicles, a Texas survival story. It was a brave thing to do, to document those experiences and share them with others. It helped people understand that they weren't alone, that workplace bullying was a real problem with real consequences. I decide that I, too, need to document my memories, not just for myself, but for all the other people who have survived similar experiences. There's power in these stories, power in the sharing of them, power in the recognition that bullies can be defeated. I think about the title Jerry chose for his neck tattoo, Born Alone, Die Alone. It was meant to be intimidating, I suppose, a declaration of independence and self-reliance. But in the end, it proved to be prophetic in ways Jerry never intended. He did die alone, professionally speaking. When his moment of crisis came, when he needed help the most, there was no one there for him. All the people he'd bullied and terrorized had abandoned him. leaving him to face the consequences of his actions by himself. That's the real lesson of Jerry Morrison's story. Leadership isn't about domination or intimidation. It's about service, about building relationships, about creating an environment where people can do their best work. Jerry never understood that, and it ultimately destroyed him. But the people who survived his reign of terror learned those lessons well. They went on to become the kind of leaders they'd wished they'd had, creating positive work environments and supporting their colleagues. They turned their painful experiences into wisdom, their suffering into strength. I smile as I think about that. In the end, Jerry Morrison failed at everything he tried to do. He failed as a manager, failed as a leader, failed as a human being. But inadvertently, he succeeded in one thing. He created a group of people who were absolutely determined never to treat others the way they'd been treated. His legacy isn't the fear and intimidation he tried to spread. It's the strength and compassion of the people who survived him and went on to make the world a better place. The Jerry Chronicles will continue, I realize, not as a story of one man's cruelty, but as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the ultimate triumph of decency over meanness, of competence over incompetence, of hope over despair. And somewhere out there in offices and workplaces across the country, other people are writing their own chapters in this ongoing story. Some are still suffering under their own Jerry Morrisons, but others are finding their own ways to fight back, to reclaim their dignity, to prove that bullies can be defeated. I raise my empty coffee mug in a mock toast to the memory of Jerry Morrison. Thanks for the lesson, I say aloud. Thanks for showing us exactly what kind of leaders we never wanted to become. Outside, the evening deepens into night, and I continue to remember, to reflect, and to honor the strength of all those who have survived their own encounters with workplace tyranny. The Jerry Chronicles will continue, but now they're stories of triumph rather than tragedy, of resilience rather than defeat. And that makes all the difference.